Hi, everyone, and welcome to ValueCast. It's the podcast where we talk about services and people. In today's episode, we're talking about a topic which I am extremely passionate about. One, because I've been a coach myself, but also been a leader for many years. It's around how people master soft skills, specifically within the procurement industry, to add more value to their business. You can see I've got a lady with me today, Laura. How are you doing, Laura?
Hi, no, I'm really good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. We'll get onto your introduction in a little bit, but you've spent, from what I can see with your profile and what we discussed before, you spent a lot of years working in the procurement environment, and now really you're focused on the executive coaching of procurement professionals.
Yes, yeah,
Yes,
indeed.
so it's quite a, as I say, it's quite an interesting topic. I'm always very passionate about when I speak about people and soft skills because I don't know about you. You can have whatever technology or process or governance in place. If you haven't got the right people and the right skill set to manage it, it ends up being a bit of a nightmare, which I'm sure you've seen and experienced throughout your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more that the people part of the role underpins everything else, doesn't it? From process and technology and procedures and everything. So yeah, it's definitely an important area to focus on.
Brilliant. So why don't you just say a few words about you, about why you're doing what you're doing and how you got there, so people know why you are talking about this specific topic.
Sure. So yeah, I spent around 10 years working in a procurement organisation, and my roles were always around supporting the procurement teams with their interactions with other departments, so namely finance. I also did some work between procurement and IT. So for me, the role of me and my team were around the business partnership element between all of the teams within there. So I did find that even though the role I first started in was around process, it soon came more into the stakeholder management piece. And then as my role grew and I grew a team, it definitely turned into more looking at change. We looked at projects, and eventually my role also took me into the employee engagement space. And I loved it, absolutely loved the people side of things. I've always taken an interest in personal development, but I really wanted to develop my own skills to not just be winging it, but also to be in a space where I'd been taught properly how to hold psychological safety for people and to help them to achieve what they were looking for. So that led me into coaching. Right. So I trained as a coach, and then I subsequently left the organization to set up my own business. And it was actually quite accidental, really, that I ended up going back into the procurement space to support leaders there, because that's where the opportunities took me. And now I'm really passionate about helping procurement professionals, procurement leaders to develop their skills, to enable their organizations and to become a strategic enabler themselves as a procurement function, and to be a great business partner.
Yeah. And continue learning yourself as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think that's one of the things I've always enjoyed about coaching and leadership is it's just, every person is completely different, has different needs, different approaches. And, I'd say that I've probably learned just as much throughout that journey as the people that I've helped and support. You probably see that too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the times when somebody comes to me for coaching, the problems might seem quite similar to those of other people, but the way we get there to solving that problem and reaching the goal is very different. So coaching is a very personalized process. It takes the skills of the coach to enable that person to get to where they want to go, but in a way that's aligned with them and who they are. Because like you say, everybody's different. Yeah. And what's really interesting in the procurement space as well is because procurement looks different in each and every organization and sector. So that's also, it's very context dependent. So that's where coaching can really help as well.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, it's a complete wide ranging, you can have a specific skill set, but you have to utilize it differently if you move into a different type of category or a different type of business. So it's about how to master those things. That's a good transition into what we wanted to talk about, really. So one thing I do like to do, and I'm not saying that everyone doesn't know what soft skills means, but if you look at sort of ground zero, you don't know, you've just come into procurement. What are the soft skills that are really important when it comes to working in the procurement industry?
Yeah, so and it's a great question as well around the ground zero thing, because we talk about soft skills, but if anything, they're actually really hard to master in a lot of ways. So I find that quite funny that we call them that. So, we're talking about elements like effective communication, teamwork, problem solving, being adaptable, having emotional intelligence, time management, the way that we resolve and deal with conflict. So there's so many skills that come under that banner. And of course, the way that we need to employ those, depending on the situations that we're in, can also vary. Yeah. So from a ground zero, as you put it, point of view, it's about understanding the needs of the stakeholders, of the organization, and your own needs as well, and the role that you play in that as a business partner to the organization.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's interesting because I know you said you sort of fell back into procurement, but it does help, right, that you've sort of lived and breathed in that type of industry, and have the ability to sort of apply the coaching skills to it. But when you look at the people you've helped or even worked with, do you believe there's a specific trend? Let's not call them soft skills today, actually. Let's just call them skills, right? I probably agree with you on that wording. Is there a trend in specific skills where you see businesses or individuals lacking, or is it quite different depending on who you work with?
I think it's an interesting one, because I think it depends on the level that they're working at. So, for example, if I work at a CPO level, they could be looking at delivering their own strategy and raising the profile of their team. I also work with people who are new to management within procurement, so it's about building their own personal brand. There's always a strand underneath it about the individual needs. So, procurement's gone through quite a very volatile time. There's been a lot of challenges thrown at procurement's way over the last few years, and while that's been great in terms of raising the profile of the function within an organization, it's also left a lot of, destruction's a big word, but left a lot of challenges in its wake. People are looking for purpose, they're looking for understanding themselves and how to deal with that work-life balance. So there's in terms of things that they're lacking, I think sometimes people just want to find a bit of direction again and a bit of motivation, and on a one-to-one basis, that's where coaching can really help. But in terms of skills, I think certainly there's an element about being strategic and adaptable to what the organization needs. So they're just looking for a safe space, a confidential space, somewhere where they can just bring out their own ideas and to go, okay, is this what I need to do? Rather than it just swirling around their own head. Because as the requirements of procurement have grown in terms of what they need to do to support their business, they're constantly trying to sort of reinvent who they are. And that takes a lot of confidence. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of skill. So using what I would say they're lacking is just around having that space and time to think about what they need to take forward.
Yeah, and that's half the battle, isn't it? Because when you move into a very complex business with a lot of things that require change, whilst doing your own job, however much a CPO or a leader within procurement is a leader, there's still a lot of the general day-to-day work to do, right? It's not always the easiest time. And do you find that businesses then, because you're doing this job because there's a need for people, they need help and they need support. Do you feel there's a lacking from business perspective about how businesses are actually supporting the individuals that you're working with? Or is it just simply that the businesses have the tools that are available, it's just because people are too busy to really focus on it?
That's a great question. I think it depends. You're gonna get a lot of it depends from me, but it is dependent on the context. You've got a lot of organizations do have programs in place to support their staff, right? They have L&D programs. They might have coaching providers or independent coaches like myself who come in. And then there's also the mental health support as well, where you have mental health first aiders, or you've got where you've got advice lines that you can call up if you're part of a big organization. I think what it is, is just about as time progresses and as the function is developing, there's a lot of not knowing, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that's where the organizations or the people that the heads of procurement that I speak to, they just want to come to somewhere where it's sort of outside of the environment, to hold a mirror up to themselves and go, okay, what's going on here with me? Because sometimes I think I find that people come to me as well where it's like, oh, I don't get the support, or I feel like I need to change my role. And sometimes the problem that they're dealing with might look like they need to change a role or move on, but actually it's about understanding themselves and how they deal with those patterns that come through. So I think, sorry, it's a very like, it depends, answer, but
Yeah.
I think the structure is in place in organizations, but because workload has increased, there's a real lack of boundary between home and life, home life and work, because we work from home a lot more. I think it's just, people just need time to step back and assess everything.
Yeah. I think my experiences have more been that there are, obviously, for mid-sized organizations, it's more difficult to put investment into training individuals in a specific way. But, a lot of the training that I've seen, it's very generic, and it's very, it's a course, right? You put on a course, you complete what you need to complete, and then you're expected to deliver based on it. But a course can't teach you necessarily how to be consistent in, how you coach your team members, right? And how not only do you evolve your personal skill set, how do you evolve the team or the leaders that work for you underneath them?
That is sorry, go on.
No. It's just hence why it's, I think it's, for me, you can be taught a methodology, but you can't be taught how to deploy and manage that methodology. That was what I was going to say.
Yeah, that is such a great point. And I think this actually comes back to that business partnership I was talking about and the position that procurement's in, because how can you be a great business partner to an organization and their needs if you're not also looking at your own needs? And I think, like I say, you can go to a course, you can learn how to lead people, you can learn how to give feedback, but the more you understand yourself, the easier it is to then be there and support others. Because if your own needs aren't being met as a leader, if you're feeling frustrated in your role, it really puts a barrier up to how you lead and support your team. And so when we were talking about soft skills earlier on, about this communication, conflict resolution, soft skills lend themselves to all of that, but the emotional intelligence piece is absolutely vital, because it's not only about understanding others, it's about understanding yourself. And that could be a really daunting journey to go on, right? To go and understand your own thought patterns, your own behaviors, the patterns that you've recognized over your career. But that's why doing it with the support of a coach is really, really vital. And then also back to what you were saying about supporting your own team and having that coaching culture within your own team and organization. A really interesting statistic is that leadership behavior can impact an organization's bottom line by up to 30%. Wow. Either way. So that comes from studies by Hay Group. Okay, so that's where I think that procurement are in a really pivotal position as a function, because not only do they do activities that impact the organization's bottom line, but they're also in a position where they actually could hold that capability to drive that behavior themselves. So to hold those soft skills, those coaching skills within that function could have massive ripple effects across the organization.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's, one thing I do love about, LinkedIn as a platform is some of the stuff that you see shared, around the fact that procurement is, it is the beating heart of an organization, right? And it should be treated that way, because you have hands into every single thing. But you mentioned a very good thing there about, sort of coaching skills versus, soft skills. How do they complement each other in a specific way? Like, do you think they're things that are important for people to know about that?
So in terms of soft skills, these are, as I said before, about the effective communication, about how you interact with others. Coaching skills use and draw upon all of those skills, but coaching is a structured process where you can go in and be a coach to somebody else. But when you learn to be a coach as well, you also get coached. So the more you are in touch with yourself and your own needs as a coach, the more you can service others. So as a leader, as coach, you are in such a better position to support your team if you are giving yourself the support and resourcing yourself as well. So the difference, I think, is that while coaching enables you to support others, it also makes these soft skills second nature. So that there'll be some things that we have naturally. We all have skills that are natural to us. Some people might think that, or I can't be very adaptable, I'm not very creative, I'm a very process driven person. But actually, the more we understand ourselves, the more we can then push ourselves to learn and take on these new skills. So I think while coaching itself, and it's, you know, I see this happen a lot where people think coaching is just being directive and telling people things, where you'll know it's very far from the truth. Coaching is very non-directive. The coach believes that the individual has all the resources within them to move forward, and it's our job to get that out of them. So while they are different, they complement each other so well. And I think the better coach you are, the more natural these soft skills also become. So, and here's the other thing, just about procurement as well, again, with this business partnership, when we work in a supporting function like procurement and we want to service the needs of our stakeholders, I sometimes see a trap that people fall into, and I used to fall into it myself. I was like, oh, well, the more I do for them, the more I'll be respected, or the more I'll be valued, or the more I'll be put up there, we'll get that seat at the table. Whereas actually, there's something around being a better business partner when it's a proper 50-50. Now, 50-50, you know, that's movable. But what I mean is that you're giving as much to yourself and to your team as you are to the stakeholders, because you show up better for your stakeholders if you're showing up for yourself. So that's the other thing that I think coaching is really pivotal for, is for great business partnership.
Yeah. 100%. I think, you know, the days of sort of dictatorial management should be gone by now. I'm sure there are cases where it still does happen, but I have to 100% agree with you. Like, since I look back at my career, like, I was in leadership roles for many years, and then obviously moved in to a coaching role, and I was like, oh my God, this is a massive leap for me to start coaching and moving into this type of industry. But actually, when I started doing it, I was like, there's not a huge amount of difference here. So what I was doing as a leader is I was coaching these people. And actually, I didn't realize I had this in me until I actually stopped and said, well, what do you need to do to be a coach? And actually have that reflection and sometimes I think that is the challenge with whether it's procurement or any other industry, is just, to your point, it's that sort of taking a step back, taking time to actually identify, one, what sort of person you are, what motivates you, and what skills do you really have, right? Because I don't think, you know, a lot of people that I work with and coach myself, it was always down to the fact they never had time to think about themselves. And it's so important to take that break, isn't it?
It really is, but it can feel really selfish when you're in a role that supports others. So, you know, have you heard that phrase where it's like, when you're on a plane and they say, always fit your oxygen mask before you help others with yours? And it's because, you know, you're in a better position, you're better resourced. So I think that's something that we can easily fall into the trap of, is that, especially when you want to be a person-centered leader, you want to give everything to your team and to the people that you're working with. But it's so important. And like you say, how often do we actually take the time to reflect? And people sometimes might think, oh, you know, what does that mean? Do I have to sit and journal? Do I have to sit and think and meditate? You know, that everybody will have their own ways that work for them. So for me, reflecting, like, I love to listen to a podcast and get out for a walk, you know. So, and I don't always give myself the time to do that running a business. So at the weekends, you know, as a family, we try and make sure we get out as well. And the podcast I sort of do when I'm maybe cleaning around the house or something, I don't know. But yeah, it's I think something that is really important is that reflection, because then we can notice the link between our thoughts, and then the way that impacts our feelings, and then the way that impacts our behaviors. And that's the bedrock of emotional intelligence, right? Of that self-awareness. So, and it doesn't have to be like for a long amount of time. It could just be a couple of minutes, you know, before you go into a meeting. You know, we rush from one meeting to another. You know, just taking 5 minutes just to take a breath rather than scroll on the phone, because that's what most of us do, right? We'll just pick up our phone and scroll for a bit before the next meeting. But, you know, reflection's really powerful.
Definitely. One of the things that I've but just by the way, so you get yours by walking, listening to podcasts and stuff. I get more reflection time by going out for a run every single morning. And I know, but it's funny because over the years, you know, you try certain methods a certain ways and it doesn't work, you know. And now once you find that niche, you should consistently keep hold of it. And I think that's what I wanted to move on to next, really, is because it's great helping someone to identify where they need to develop, you know, if it's emotional intelligence or whatever that skill set is, to make them a better coach within their team and a better leader. Often I've seen, and I've done it myself, is the element of consistency. It's about how do you keep it up? how do you make sure that you don't let it drop and you don't fall back into ways that are ineffective? Like, do you deploy any methods with the people you work with to enable that, to make sure they get into that consistent routine so they continue to speak, or not to speak about, sorry, to think about themselves?
Yeah, I mean, so when I coach, I don't do one-off sessions. I do like a program of 6 months, and and I always say to my clients, the barriers will come. It's about how we recognise that they're there. So I keep them accountable. That's part of my role as a coach, to remind them. Remember, we've been here. We've seen this before. What do we identify that could help you to move through this barrier? And I think it's about self-compassion, like noticing that if we're trying to break out of patterns that we've been doing for quite a while, we are going to find that routine and familiarity brings us back sometimes. And it's about recognizing it in the moment and going, okay, what can I do? So staying consistent does involve a lot of self-compassion. Absolutely. Yeah. It involves, like, say, recording, writing it down, reflecting. I think as well, I actually talked about this the other day on LinkedIn around the difference between perfectionism and excellence, because they're not the same thing for me. So sometimes we can get so stuck on what looks perfect before we make a move that we never actually make that move, or we never get something quite finished. Whereas excellence is around recognizing, okay, what can I tweak? Because progress looks different for everyone. Again, with my coaching sessions, I sort of say to them, it might be that we're expecting to do that, and it might do that, it might go straight up, but also be prepared, it could be like this. But as you get to recognize those patterns, you can then start to make the bigger changes, and big changes happen over time. Sometimes we get big bang changes, but actually it's those small consistent steps of doing something regularly. So if that is reflecting, like we spoke about, if that is taking that time for a moment before you go into a meeting, maybe it's having someone to bounce off, to make sure that you're talking regularly with a trusted person. It looks different for everybody, and that's part of what coaching is about discovering what works well for you, what your strengths are. And also, I like to remind my clients when they've forgotten, because I do take quite a lot of notes in our sessions, and I quite like to join the dots for them. So like they might say, oh, I can't do this, and I might challenge them and go, Funny enough, when we were speaking a session ago, you talked about this scenario, and that's what I see here. It's the same thing. And they go, oh, yeah. So it is about having that mirror to reflect against as well.
Yeah, definitely is. Definitely is. There's quite a lot here, hoping people can take from this discussion, because it's not, it's not technically about, sitting out and grading. Okay, how good am I at communication? How good am I at this, and why? You have to take a step back and say, well, what do I need to be within this role? How do I need to apply myself? Because I think you mentioned something a bit earlier. It's like, if you move from one industry to the other, you could be a CPO for a manufacturing organization, and you've got a good set of skills that are tailored to that area. You suddenly then move to a financial organization, and your emotional intelligence needs to be different. The way you communicate needs to be different. And in fact, you've probably got a team underneath you that might communicate in a different way than the other one. So it's just a constant adapting. And if I'm taking a couple of things from this today, and if people are, it really is, the mindfulness and the reflectiveness and the consistency, regardless of whatever skills it is, it's applying techniques to make sure you're approaching it in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So where do you place motivation in all this? Because a person comes to you. So I've come to you. I'm not in a great place. I don't feel I'm doing a particularly good job. Something's not right with how I'm managing my team, or just how I'm performing in my job. But ultimately, I know something needs to happen. How do you sort of weave motivation into that? Because you've got to be motivated to make that change, haven't you? It's not just as easy as go, you need to work on these skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And motivation has to be intrinsic, right, to really make sustainable change. So we take a look at the client's values, what matters to them, what's important to them. And we all have values, right? They're like a guiding light for us. They dictate our decision making, our motivation levels. And when we're sat feeling frustrated in a role or with a situation, it's most likely because our values have been betrayed or conflicted by somebody. And we all have them, but they might be subconscious to us. So I do tend to do a lot of values work with my clients. So they might already have an idea of what they are if they've worked with a coach before. They might know what their company values are, but it's how they relate to them individually. So once you have a really good grasp of what your values are, and it just sort of makes sense. And then we might even look at a career timeline where they go, so where were these values in action when things were going really well? And what was happening with your values when things weren't going so well? And it's when they understand, it's like a light bulb goes off. It's like, oh, that's why, so once they're able to recognize and bring to the light those values, it then dictates their decision making moving forwards. So if they feel stuck in a scenario or a situation, they can come back to their values and go, okay, does this decision align with my values or not? And when we talk about gut feeling, we talk about whether we've got a good gut feeling or not for something. A lot of the time, that's also linked to our values as well. So I think that definitely is it's one of the cornerstones and foundations of coaching. Really, for me, is exploring values of the individual, and then the motivation comes from that.
Yeah, definitely. I find it really interesting in the work I've done in the past, though, that some people aren't motivated by having values. They're actually quite happy to be motivated by different traits, but more often than not, when you're looking at CPOs or leaders in procurement or any type of industry, you sort of do need that set of values, and you need to have it clear in your head what you're trying to achieve. Otherwise, how the hell are you going to expect your team to, help you and help the business through that course if you're not betraying what your values are?
Yeah, I mean, values are what we stand for. They're part of our personal branding. It's what people say about us when we're not in the room, really. And just touching on what you said there, people might be driven by, let's take a really easy one. Sometimes we're driven by money, but so let's talk about financial reward. That might be something that we feel driven by, but money isn't the value. Money is the vehicle to fulfilling a value. So what does that money do for you? Is it about security? Is it about stability? Is it about achievement? So taking something like financial reward, it could be that, what's enough? What does it get you? So that's where we do the further explanation under the values. Another one's like sport. You said about doing running, in the morning. What does running do for you? What does it get you? So some people might do sport because they like a sense of adventure. For others, it's because they like to do risk-taking activities and sports, like jumping out of a plane or something, So it's really interesting to understand the motivations behind the other things that we strive for.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just to clarify, being 48 and running the amount I do, all running gives me outside of the mental space is very sore knees. So sometimes I think I should stop myself.
I'm sure it works well for you in the end.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be a pensioner one day, so I'll keep going until I am. So we've been through quite a bit there. Lots of different areas of advice where people can sort of start to reflect and take note about how they could improve their skill set. But if you were to give that, let me know if you were to. Is there one piece of consistent advice you give to everyone you coach, regardless of the situation? Or would you say it's very, very separated depending on what that person wants?
I think I would always say hold some self-compassion, because you're going to learn things about yourself, which will massively value you. But it's, you need to have the courage to share that with somebody, and that's where the trust comes in with a coach as well. That we're not judgmental. We accept the whole person as they are. So I always encourage that in my clients, to bring their whole selves to coaching, be courageous, and have that self-compassion. Yeah, I think that's definitely the first one. I think the second one would be around the values, because I see it time and time again in my clients that it provides a big light bulb for them. And then I guess a final piece of advice would be that sometimes we get in our own heads and we think that we're the only ones that think that way. So, you hear people talking about imposter syndrome or feeling like we overthink things. Believe me, it's a very, very common thing that we all go through. And I think having the courage to go and address it is really valuable and really rewarding as well. So it
Yeah.
can change. We can change patterns. We can change habits. But having someone like a coach really helps to keep you accountable.
Definitely. Yeah, and all this work, firstly, thank you so much for going through all that. I think, a lot of the work that you're doing and other coaches out there that I see is very valuable because, the shift that everyone seems to be talking about or has been talking about in procurement for many years is trying to move the perception away from a department that really is just about clipping costs and saving money because procurement is so much more than that. And I think the more people take time to reflect and harness their skill sets, the more the perception of what procurement does will move further away and actually show that yeah, this is providing real value. So I'm definitely a big advocate of what you're doing. And you've got this new service that you released called Procure. Is that right? Have I
Yes.
pronounced it right?
Yes, it's the Procure coaching framework. So these are skills that lend themselves to the soft skills and coaching skills that is done in a flexible framework way to help procurement to be that business partner, that strategic enabler, and to effectively create a coaching culture. So yeah, I'll be bringing that out shortly. I've already started putting some resources out there. I've just remembered something after you've just said that, if you don't mind me bringing it up, about common themes and stuff about the perception of procurement. There is one thing that I'm ardently passionate about when it comes to breaking perceptions of procurement, and that's that procurement are not creative. Because I see it time and time again in my clients that it just needs space to breathe, but there is so much creativity in procurement, so much passion. I do think as well, just some food for thought, that it is about changing perceptions for procurement, but that perception also needs to change from within.
Yeah.
Again, that's where coaching comes in, but all those reflections, those thoughts, because we sometimes focus so much on what the others are thinking about the perception of procurement. And of course, they hold the power in a lot of that case, depending on who that stakeholder is. But there's so much that can be done with perception from within, because once we believe that things can change, that's where the gift is. So yeah, that's something else that I'm really passionate about, and that's what the Procure framework hopes to address.
That's great. That's great. It's it's hard, right? When people like even I had perception. Well, my wife used to work in procurement, 25 years ago, for a national rail organisation, and she was straight out of university, and she never stepped back into procurement again because the way the culture and things was, and I was like, it's a lot different nowadays. It's a lot different. You should take a step back in, but she's a classics teacher now, so probably not the right way to go. Just quickly before we finish up, we've talked a lot about other people, but I can clearly see you're very passionate about supporting and helping and evolving, others. But what about you? What do you do to keep yourself motivated? Outside of your day-to-day job.
I'm a huge tennis fan.
Right.
I can't play it for toffee at all, but I'm great at watching it. So the French Open's on at the moment. So I think I do love to follow the tennis tour all the way around the year. So I really enjoy that. I love to go out walking in the great outdoors with the family. And I'm a huge languages fan. That was actually my origins, like when I came into my career. So I studied languages at uni, and I actually spent a fair bit of time living abroad and working abroad. And I'm hugely passionate about communicating and connecting with others. And I think that's why I love coaching so much, because it is around language. So I've got a huge passion in particular for Spain, and for tapas, for Spanish food. So I love to cook. So there's a lot of passion in that for me as well. So anything Spain and Spanish related, I absolutely love.
Is it just Spanish that you studied in, or are you multilingual?
Well, my degree is in modern languages, so I did 3. So I did French, Spanish, and Russian.
Wow.
So, but Spanish is my main one that I focus on now. But I was fortunate to spend time in all 3 countries. So yeah, it was great.
Well, hopefully you're getting your kids to do it as well. Like mine have taken up via the use of Duolingo, because it's a nice, easy tool to use. But my 7-year-old and 10-year-old, they're about 40+ day streaks into one's learning Spanish, one's learning Italian. So, and they know more than me, and I'm quite embarrassed about it. But it means if I go on holiday there, I wouldn't have to raise a finger. So maybe I can relax a bit more.
Brilliant. Well, Duolingo is a great one. The poor kids, actually, they've got no choice but to listen to some Spanish music. So I've taught them things like to count and those sorts of things. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's a passion of mine. Hopefully they'll also be passionate about it. But I'm just keen on helping them discover their own passions as well.
Yeah.
But they will be getting dragged to Spain for a few holidays, hopefully, to sort of go back and see some old friends and things like that. So that would be fun.
Brilliant.
But we'll see. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I really enjoyed our chat today. Been absolutely brilliant, Laura.
Thank you.
And I hope that people that have been listening and watching have taken something from it. So yeah, just want to thank you for your time, and we'll keep in touch.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for having me.